Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk About That, the family life podcast of Peace, Lutheran Ministries, Antigo, Wisconsin, where we talk about some of life's biggest issues and questions with a Christian worldview. I'm Blake Brockman, the Director of Youth and Family Ministries here at Peace, and we're starting a new series on Let's Talk About That, where we're going to talk about technology and social media and the internet. And joining me for the first episode where we talk about these things, and we're really going to dive into social media, is my friend, son of the congregation, and pastor of Shepherd of the Desert Lutheran Church, John Carolus. John, how are you?
Hey, Blake, I am great. Thanks for having me on. I'm one of the pastors here at Shepherd of the Desert. I'm not the pastor, I'm an associate pastor. So
okay,
I appreciate it.
Is that your new title? Because when you started there, you were the director of digital ministry. So is your title and job kind of changed since October?
Yes, it has. So I was hired as director of digital mission, specifically focused on our outreach. And that took on a bunch of different forms, but especially our social media presence, our targeted advertising, a little bit of like web analytics and topical issues. Some interviews and podcasts and stuff like that. And then also our primary ministry outreach, which is like digital services and stuff like that. And then over the course of the year, that actually was a year ago yesterday, I moved to Arizona. So, but over the course of the summer and the fall, I transitioned into more of a typical pastoral role. I had been preaching on Sundays quite a bit anyways, and then took on some responsibilities in high school youth and young adult youth, and over at our preschool, being the pastoral support over there for the staff, students, and families. And then since ordination in October, title switched from director of digital mission to associate pastor. And now I'm pretty much the primary pastor in those areas that I just listed: our modern worship, our high school youth, our preschool ministry. I still oversee our digital outreach, but I also coordinate our baptism effort and am involved in a couple of other different things. But yeah, so quite a bit of transition, but still kind of the guy when it comes to our ministry online. I don't do editing and production and things like that. We've got a really great guy who Matt McLean is his name, who kind of takes on that sort of stuff, but he and I work really closely together.
Sure, very nice. Yeah, for those that, especially here at Peace, that maybe don't know, your guys' church side of things is 2 campuses, correct?
Yeah, we have a kind of unique setup. We've got 2 campuses. They're really only about 300 or 400 yards apart. So they don't serve different geographies, but they do serve different populations as far as a worship preference. So typical sanctuary, not too differently shaped from Peace actually, but a little bit smaller room, a little bit smaller scale. But that's where we'd have traditional worship with pews and with vestments and the altar up front, communion rail, all that kind of stuff. And then we have a modern worship space that's a little bit more typical of contemporary churches today, with a stage up front, a band, typically dark room, but rock music, a little bit more casual dress, and a little bit more casual setting. And that's one thing that I'm in charge of when it comes to our pastor stuff. But that modern campus is where we house our preschool, and that's where all those classrooms are. And on our traditional or main campus, we have some relationships with a school for kids with autism, and they rent out our buildings that used to house a Lutheran day school, but that shut down a number of years ago. And now we're renting out to this really cool ministry for ministry and resource for families that deal with autism.
Oh, that is really cool. That's a nice, unique way of, you have an empty building and still using it for ministry, not just selling it off to keep the money and stuff. Oh, that's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, super blessed to have them around and to have a relationship with them. It's cool.
Yeah, very nice. So John and I are going to chat about social media, the good, bad, ugly, setting boundaries, all that kind of stuff, because John and I have, I don't know if grown up is the right term, but we have definitely lived, like we were in, I remember, when did you get your first, like, Facebook? Do you remember when you signed up for Facebook?
It was a permission reserved for members of my family over the age of 14.
Okay.
So 14th birthday present, Facebook account.
Freshman in high school. So we were like, that's 2009, late 2009.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay. Yeah. And I remember I got my Facebook account in 2008
Whoa.
because there were no restrictions in our house for most things. But we grew up when like through Facebook booming, through Twitter booming, through Instagram booming, through some fads of social media like Vine, which is
Rest
for
in
people
peace.
that don't know, rest in peace. For people that don't know, Vine was essentially TikTok, but better.
TikTok's dad.
Yeah. But like we were around, like when YouTube really took off, we were in high school and we're watching, and I mean, I still currently watch a decent amount of YouTube, but like we were a part of a generation that really helped it.
We were like present for the transition from YouTube being a place that was unique and a little bit fringe into it becoming totally mainstream. And now,
Yeah.
I mean, it's the number one search engine.
Right. Yeah.
Even though Google owns it, you know, it's used for everything.
Yeah. So we have, I don't know, been around the block. We've seen things. We have a very unique perspective as opposed to some of you watching this that are maybe adults, grandparents, who did not grow up, like maybe the form of social media you grew up with was a chat room that you had to put a floppy disk into your computer for or something. And you have kids and grandkids, and we will have kids eventually that will like from day one grow up with social media, with technology, with essentially like my phone's right here, like the power of a computer in like the palm of your hand in your pocket. So we're going to focus mostly on social media today. And John, I guess a good place to start, I think, is like where we are kind of at with social media. So if you wouldn't mind sharing some of the social medias that you have used and that you currently use, and maybe sharing how much time that you spend on those.
Yeah, I doing the tally is almost depressing, but so I mean, I'm on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, WhatsApp, a little bit of Twitter. I use YouTube, but not really a ton. And then I also occasionally will use like GroupMe and a couple others, but that's more so for specific communications to a particular group of people. But that's what I'm on. I never had a Vine, but I love watching my friends' Vines, But I mean, it's funny. I've set a limit on my Instagram and my TikTok for 20 minutes, so that even though I don't always follow that limit, but I at least get a warning that says, "Hey, you've been on this for 20 minutes today." And the most embarrassing days is when it comes on in one session. Haven't opened it that day, and then I open it, and then 20 minutes later, I'm still on it, and it's like, oh man, I probably should be doing something better with my time.
Yeah. Yeah, I have limits too. I mean, to kind of go backwards in the order that you went, I have limits on. So I have Facebook and Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and YouTube currently. I've never had a TikTok, and I don't plan on getting one. But I did have Vine back in the day. I do watch YouTube.
Yep.
But I try to keep my screen time down to about 2 hours a day max.
Nice.
So like my Twitter time is like 20 minutes on Instagram, and like 45 minutes a day on YouTube at the most is the time limit where it shows up and says, hey, you've been on here this long. And I would agree. It is kind of embarrassing when like you're scrolling through Instagram or like Instagram and Twitter, especially because for me, it's like 20-minute time limits. And it's like, oh shoot, like I've been on some weird deep dive on Instagram or Twitter for way too long.
Yeah.
But man, I'm trying to think of like, I don't know. I like in middle school, it really was only Facebook, and I didn't have Twitter until high school. And then I actually took a break from Twitter.
There's like some photo sharing sites and stuff, Tumblr and Flickr, things like that.
I did not have those.
I mean, they were different, but they weren't quite the same. People still use them, but that was all mostly like archival stuff. It wasn't a ton of interaction, I don't think. Of course, there's Reddit. I also have a Reddit account, but I don't really use it at all.
I have used Reddit maybe twice. I don't have an account, but I've been on it before. So you're probably, if you're like an older adult, you're probably hearing us share some of these social medias and going, what is a Reddit? What is Flickr? I totally forgot about Flickr. That's pretty dead at this point, I would say. But I guess like the next question is like, I think we need to share what's popular and that it's not all the same, because sometimes like social media, I think it's grouped together as being all the same thing. And that's not necessarily the case. So like most people know about Facebook, people share videos, posts, pictures for the most part. Maybe you sell your car on Facebook or do something like that. But then like Twitter is very different, where you share, thoughts, funny jokes. You can still share pictures and videos, but I don't think that's as common on Twitter. And then you have Instagram, which shares just pictures or videos. But then like you have TikTok. So could you explain what TikTok is to maybe the older generation?
Really, the only thing so TikTok is a scrolling video app. And so you just watch a video, then you scroll to the next one, you scroll to the next one. You have two options to watch videos from: either pages that you follow, so you're watching content that you've already told TikTok that you like, or it's suggested content. And I think the majority of people watch suggested content rather than content that they're following, because it shows up in both places if they're following it. And it uses an algorithm to track your activity across apps so that it's delivering content to you that you're spending time looking at in other places. And so for me, that tends to be either memes or cars and a little bit of maybe like nature or coffee, but otherwise that's pretty much it. And then if I see something that I think is funny, I will send it to a friend, or and that'll be, and they let you send to different apps. So it'll screen cap the video, and you can Snapchat it to somebody, and they don't have to have TikTok to watch the video that you're sharing with them, that kind of thing. So so TikTok, and I think it maybe just a good way to categorize these is like, are you interacting with other people? Are you driving for connection? Are you looking for communication? Are you looking for a mixing of ideas? Are you looking for just to see what other people are up to? Are you looking for ideas on certain things? Pinterest, technically, social media, which might be popular or something. I don't have a Pinterest account, but I know people are still pretty active on it.
Right.
So Facebook, I think, is a place where people go to share lives with each other rather than see what's happening out in the world. Some people maybe go there for news and different things, but for the most part, it seems to be kind of like a live scrapbook,
Whereas Twitter is more of a news place. That's where people go to get news, share insights, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And share their reactions to it too, it seems like, or share a story about something that they've seen or whatever. But that seems to be much more kind of like serious of a place. I mean, it's all mixed together, but
what were you going to say about Instagram? Go ahead.
It just seems to be like that's one where you go to see what other people are doing rather than really interact with them so much as catch up with them. Snapchat, I use it almost as text messaging.
Yep.
I guess not everyone does that, but I message on Snapchat quite a bit.
And then like TikTok is more of just like an entertainment
for sure
social media. That's kind of like what YouTube has transformed into, is entertainment, maybe like self-help, you could say. You can really find whatever you want there, but man, I'm trying to think of what other social medias. There probably are some things that we don't even know about that kids are using.
Clubhouse is one that kind of came and went. It still has a lot of users, but it was sort of like a radio app where certain people could host a Clubhouse, and then it was open to anyone to come and listen in on. Yeah. But only the host could allow certain people to speak. So, for a while, there's a lot of people that were using it, but I haven't seen it pop up on
that's a good point.
Really at all lately. I would say one thing that does tie social media all together is that the dangers and the risks are pretty similar across all platforms. And it kind of takes on two forms. You have sort of the personal risk or danger, and I don't mean to say this to scare anybody, but you have to enter into these things knowing that your information is being shared, and you're giving access to, a lot of times you're giving access to what you look at on your phone, what you look at on your browser, to these apps so that they can tailor content that pertains to what your interests are. And then there's so that's kind of like the technological side, I should say, sort of informational risk. And then the personal side is, well, you could end up having bad interactions with other people. So and that seems to be something that carries it's across all apps. Yeah,
that was I have two questions on that danger, negativity side of social media. I think you hit it, right on the head with the technology side. That is something that I think some people are very attuned to, maybe a little too attuned to it. They think that, like social media is out for your information and they're going to misuse it. And not that they can't, and I'm not trying to say that they haven't, but that's not what it's for necessarily. They're doing it to try and keep you on the wagon here, essentially.
There's certainly businesses trying to make money off
Yeah.
of selling ads based on how long you're there. So they are going to try and keep you there.
Yeah. But do you have any other kind of negatives or dangers with social media?
I just really briefly, the ones that I have are, from a negative of, say, kids being on is, you can end up divulging personal information that a young person just might not have the understanding of the value of personal information. Whether it be location or personal details, things about who you are, where you go to school, what kind of things you're into. But that personal information is actually pretty valuable. And we know that it's valuable even from an economic point of view, because these companies sell it to each other. So personal information, I think there's a risk of bullying. There's a risk of access to inappropriate content. And that can cause any number of issues later on in life. But, there's significant negatives, and danger is probably, and it's just fair to list these out. I mean, predators, identity theft, personal theft with scams, viruses, all that's out there. I hate to say, brainwashing in the sense of like political conspiracy, but there are groups out there that are trying to impact the way people think and recruit them for certain ideals or certain projects. And whether that's, back in the day when we talk a lot about ISIS recruiting people through social media, or it's simply, a more, just a political group trying to get their message out there. Sometimes that takes place, but I do think, you did have a question, you sent over about pros. I think it is fair,
I think we do need to talk about that.
Too,
right. Yes, we do need to talk about the pros. I just think it's good to get I think we do think a lot about those dangers, and you hit all of them that I was going to say on the head. And we'll dive more into those as we get further into this series, because some of them are really real, unfortunately, that parents need to be aware of. But there are pros to social media, and maybe not necessarily. I think it's dangerous. The question I sent to you is, what are the pros of your kids being on social media? But I think just in general, pros of social media is you do, especially with things like Facebook, Instagram, you do get to stay in touch with people in some form or fashion. I think if there's something the pandemic taught us, it's that we can still kind of grow in relationships, interpersonal relationships through, the internet, being thousands of miles apart and whatnot. But what other pros do you think of when you think of social media?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Connection to friends and family, but also and entertainment. I mean, some people watch the TV every night. Some people read the paper. Some people hang out on social media and go there for humor, go there for news, go there for interaction, whatever it is. Entertainment, I think, is a big pro, especially because it's seemingly coming free. Ability to express somebody's self, something that's totally their own. I think that's a pro. I think it's good for people to have something that they can create in their own mind, in their own space, and share it. And so I think that's a pro. I don't know that that's something that everyone really leans on it for, if they're able to have another creative outlet, but that seems to be something that people enjoy for sharing, different projects they're working on, whether it's art or writing or speaking or videos or whatever it is. People seem to like it for that as well.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think especially today, we hammer social media so hard and say things like TikTok is bad and blah, blah, blah. And it's I liked what you said about some people watch TV, some people read the paper, some people do puzzles. It's entertainment. I kind of laugh when people say streaming or streamers, people play video games online is weird. And it's fine that it's weird for you. That's not a bad thing, but that is a form of entertainment. It's truly, it's no different than watching someone
play golf.
Play golf. Yeah. Or the fishing channel or something like that. Like, it's just something that someone else likes to, be entertained by.
I love the irony in the picture of, the hypothetical dad watching a Packer game or whatever and yelling at his kid for watching a streamer on the couch. It's like, hey, we're all doing the same thing here. But
right.
Not to say that there isn't, there's certainly healthy limits within that realm, but it's a funny thing to think about.
Yeah. And I think with the pros and the negatives, the cons isn't necessarily the thing, because I think dangers are worse than cons. But with all of that in mind, we do have a responsibility as the older generation to help the younger generations navigate social media in a Christian way. And so how would you say that we can help the next generation navigate social media as a Christian, as a Christ follower?
I think that the great thing about social media, whatever form it is you're given an opportunity to participate in a platform that extends all over the world. And it can be as effective to your neighbor next door to you as it is to somebody all the way in another country or another context. But I think an important thing to do when talking about how to navigate it as a person and as a Christian is teaching anyone that's using it that the people they're interacting with are still real people. In some cases, there are maybe bot accounts or whatever, but when people are spending time on there, they're real people too. So the things that we say, the things we type out, the way that we criticize other people or lift them up can be pretty instrumental, pretty effective, and have an impact on their mind and their emotions. Another important thing too is to remember that once you post something, even if you try to delete it or erase it, it's going to be there forever. And and so it's just something to keep in mind, that do you want your stuff that's going to last forever to be Christian? Or do you want it to be something that you'd regret? Do you want it to be something you posted in haste? It might be better if you don't take that leap or you use that as your outlet of frustration, because it's hard to take back some of that stuff. And you see it happen all the time in the way our world works, where tweets are dug up from 10 years ago and they are getting people fired from government positions and university positions and stuff like that. So, and I think a reminder that there's no trend, app, or account that any Christian person, any youth, any kid needs in order to be normal or to be cool. You don't need to be on these places, but if you're on those places, there's a way to be on them in a way that's faithful, in a way that's Christian.
Yeah, that last one is not one that I had thought of. I mean, I think that's a huge piece, because I remember there were kids that we went to high school with when Facebook was huge. And if you didn't have Facebook, you were kind of on the outs, and there were kids that when we were seniors in high school didn't have Facebook, and there was a little bit of FOMO there. And, I can't speak to what they were feeling on the inside, but you could just kind of tell, like, oh, we were talking about it on Facebook, and they're like, oh,
and now I'm jealous of them.
Yes. I thought of three things, some of which you already touched on. So like the being cautious of what we say on social media. I think that we have like a right, or not a right, but like a duty, a responsibility, maybe a vocation is a good churchy word to use with how we act on social media. And I think of like Colossians 4:5, where, talks about being cautious in how you act towards outsiders, being careful of what you say. And like you said, once you post something, even if you try to delete it, it is on the internet somewhere in some form, and can probably be dug up in some way.
I have screenshot it. You don't know who saw it and saved it, whatever it is. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I have posted things that I like embarrassing, or like I would even say I've posted things that weren't necessarily appropriate or sensitive and stuff when we were growing up, in high school. And it's like, yikes. So I think we do need to remind people that, like, hey, like, people, when they see us, should see Jesus. And that includes our digital footprint. That's huge. I always tell our senior high youth, like, if you have an Instagram and you're posting yourself in college at a super rager party and you're, super drunk, like, that is not showing someone Jesus.
And it's probably not going to pay off well in the long run.
Right.
Regardless of how you spend your time, you don't need to advertise the way that you spend your time in that kind of place. Whatever social advantage it might give you in person, and in the community that you're living in, whatever. But when it comes to just trying to promote yourself online, it can be a little bit more dangerous or risky, and it's not even to shame anybody or to make anybody feel bad about things that they've done, but just to make them aware of the impact that those kinds of decisions can have. And just so that, whether you're making the decisions to do certain things like that or not, just so you're aware of the kinds of consequences that they have. Because one thing we all learned growing up is that our actions have consequences, but the consequences of digital actions can sometimes be a lot farther reaching than we understand
or want to acknowledge. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that, that applies to us as adults too. Sometimes there are political things that are not Christian, and people share them right, left, and center, like that's dangerous. And that kind of show, like, if a non-Christian, this is what I've been thinking about a lot the last few years, especially, is like what I share, hopefully a non-Christian doesn't look at that and say, isn't that guy a Christian? Isn't he supposed to think something else? Like and that's something I can't control, how people respond to everything, but that is something that I think, like, God has warned us about. Be cautious. He's not saying you need to fret over every little thing you say, but he says you need to be cautious. You need to be aware of what you say and how you act, and how we act and what we say is really put on social media a lot. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, in terms of like what we take in, it's kind of two things: what we take in and how much time we spend on social media and really technology in general. So like in Matthew 6:21, Jesus says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, right? And I think that like social media is definitely addictive. John, have you seen the documentary? What was it called? The social dilemma. That's what it was called. Have you seen that? It was on Netflix.
I think I did watch that, the Netflix one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Each streaming service seems to have one.
Yeah. Super grim. Like Hannah and I watched it and we were just like, wow. Okay. But like social media is addictive, and a lot of that is just because it puts content continuously in front of you that it thinks you want. The algorithms and all that stuff keep churning up things that they're trying to keep you watching.
Another danger I forgot to mention is it could cause you to waste a lot of time procrastinating.
And like our hearts should be focused on Christ. And there have definitely been times where I've been scrolling social media and it's like, oh, an hour has gone by, and I sit there and I think like, what, like I could have done literally anything to be productive.
What have I accomplished for the kingdom, or for my job, or for my house, or
or like for my wife, like, all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, man, that is something that I think, again, we need to just kind of remember, keep stock of. And then the last point that I have is that like the New Testament especially talks a lot about our bodies being temples of the Lord, where his spirit is literally dwelling. Yeah. And there are a lot of things that you can see and hear and engage in on social media that can very negatively affect our brains, our physical well-being, the way that we act. And so like, essentially what we take in matters. It's like, there's this whole big analogy that I've come up with that is too long to share in this podcast, but essentially like the garbage that comes in, that goes between the ears, that comes in through the eyes, that goes through the mouth, eventually comes out in our words and in our actions.
Anything you consume is feeding your heart and mind. And so, it's just like eating, as we were joking about before we started, I'm eating Whataburger, which is just fast food. Yeah. That's really not going to do a whole lot for me nutritionally. It was, and it wasn't that good going in either, but that's a choice now that I've got to live with because I just needed something convenient and cheap. Right. But the same is true for our spiritual and our mental lives as well. Yeah. Like
Things like pornography can be found on social media. That's something that we're going to talk about in a later episode, but that is something that can be accidentally or even intentionally found on most social medias.
Definitely.
And that stuff can there are studies that are put out all the time, and we'll talk about it more there, that can really mess up your brain, and that messes up how you you act like garbage in, garbage out. And it's the same thing, not just with, your phone and social media, but it's the same thing with what we watch on TV, what we listen to in the radio, etc. And so I think that, again, we need to be conscious of what we're taking in, because it then flows. It shapes who we are.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing. It totally shapes who we are, and it has an impact on the way that we treat other people. And where you spend your time makes a big difference. And because social media can take up so much time, and there's great spiritual resources on social media. I mean, there's beautiful Instagram accounts, or really powerful accounts, and access to things. I mean, we post our church services on Facebook, and we use that as a major sharing network for a lot of our spiritual resources. But it's just like a regular place of sharing ideas. And if you're walking through a city, or you're walking through a storefront or whatever, you can come across all kinds of different things.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So parents, older people might be hearing us and getting a little scared again. So how do we, as an older generation, how do we make sure that kids are safe on social media? I think that you and I have very interesting perspectives, because I'll just share, my family did not, and that's not a indictment on my parents or my upbringing.
Yeah, no.
That's just and that was just the way it was, because, and I can tell you right now, the people watching, that is very different from my younger brother and sister, who are 14 right now, where they, are being monitored and stuff. And I think that's good. But how would you answer that? How do we make sure that kids are safe today on social media?
Yeah. I mean, we kind of already touched on my upbringing, just that there was limited amount of computer time, limited amount of social media. We didn't have phones until we could drive, and we didn't have smartphones until all of us were in college. But even with that, I think the delay was wise on my parents' part. Obviously, it's not feasible for everybody, but it worked well for us. But I think there's a lot of resources out there that have professional effort in this area. And one of those that I'll just point out it's called notmykid.org. And it's in a bunch of different cities. It's kind of a nationwide organization, but they actually were started here in Scottsdale. And I've gotten to speak with one of the reps a couple of times, just for some stuff we were doing on our ministry side over here. But they give great resources to parents who are just looking for ways to understand what their kids are doing online, and also give great information on how to interact with them in a healthy way, and maybe set good limits, and also be aware of the ways that sometimes kids don't make great decisions, and they try to get behind the back of what their parents are up to. And whether that's on their own or with some friends or whatever, phones and social media provide plenty of opportunities to do that. So people might make a couple of accounts. People might use apps that are not mainstream, but are used for disappearing messages, and they look like other apps. They've got a false icon or whatever, or two-factor authentication, so that it's harder for parents to have access to those accounts. And so a resource like Not My Kid just is super helpful in getting people in touch with resources, especially if they are really struggling with a child or with a friend who seems to be in a tough spot because of what they're going through. But in general, I think since it's a parenting question, it's hard to give specific advice, but it's one, I think, where parents should remember that they have a responsibility to keep their kids safe and to protect them and maintain good relationships with them. And so, of course, be connected with them on their accounts, be friends on Facebook, follow their Instagram, be friends with them on their Snapchat and on their whatever apps they're using, follow their TikTok accounts, see what things they're liking, what things they're interacting with, who are their comments going to. And if you're able to maintain a great relationship with your kid and have a good agreement about sharing passwords and stuff, I think that's super wise, because you're not doing it because you don't trust your kid. It's literally a whole world of people that will have an opportunity at accessing things that are super personal. And so there's things that even I would recommend my parents had done differently, just because of the things we didn't know about social media and the things we didn't know about access and things like that. So just, there's all kinds, there's every day a new scam comes out on spoof accounts and false messages and links that shouldn't be clicked and all that kind of stuff. But underneath it all, I think the best way to keep your family safe is to maintain strong and good communication with them in an open way. If there's a hard line that nothing's up for negotiation, even if you have a hard stance, be open to communicating about it, because that's where there's opportunities to grow and understand each other, and hopefully continue to grow in relationship with your kids, because it's not always about, are they spending too much time on their screen, or are they spending too much time on social media? Sometimes it's about, is this getting in the way of us as a family? And at the end of the day, if this particular account shuts down, or that thing gets hacked, or whatever, your family's always going to be your family. And it starts there with open and honest communication, because that's what God created us for. And he created us in relationship with each other, primarily in relationship with our family.
Yeah. Amen. That was very good. I mean, the only thing I would add is, like, I would say don't set up like a fake account and like
be open and honest about following your
weirdly
kids.
watch your children. Like, be upfront, be honest. Your kids are like, they might not like it, especially if you're like, maybe you have a high schooler or a middle schooler, and you are starting this new, that there might be a little bit of a pushback from that, and that's okay. That's like, there isn't
like your parents are spying on you or whatever, but if you can communicate that it's coming from a place of love and care, maybe, and honestly, kids are really smart, and they understand when somebody's got hacked. They understand when someone's falling for something that they shouldn't. And so they should also too be open to understanding that there's a lot of danger out there. And so I think there's a certain trend within youth that are resistant to social media. And I think there's a lot of wisdom on their parts in that, because they see once it's out there, you can't get it back. Yeah,
I agree. So then I think, healthy social media really looks, I think we do need to talk about a little bit about boundaries. Like screen time, I think, is an easy one. And I think that that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be a bad thing. Like, if you're just going to say, lay down the law, be that super harsh line, that might not always go well. But I do think there needs to be some form of.
If that's how you parent, and you've got a great relationship with your kids, then do it. Yeah,
then do it. Right.
But healthy social media life, it's one where that you're not controlled by it, and that you are able to take a few days off or delete an account whenever you feel like you want to. And, ultimately it's kind of a personal decision on how you want to live your life. But there's a ton of studies that show the negative effects of too much time in an app or on a screen, and the limitations that does to social development and relational health and mental health. And so knowing that you are in control, I think, is a really important place to start. It's up to you.
Yeah.
Do you want the account or not? Do you want to log in today or not? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think too, like, if you have kids that are younger, setting those boundaries at an early age, I think, is good. Like, not letting them be on their tablet for an hour when they're, 5 and 6, or even longer, who knows, when they're really young, will help them as they get older, not want to be on their phone or on, whatever is on their phone at that point when they're older. And I think, something that I've seen my parents do that I think is kind of neat is, like, I would talk to your cell phone provider as a parent, and see if there's anything that they can help you with on the back end, where, again, I think you should definitely be forthcoming with your kids about that. My older siblings know that my mom and stepdad can see what they see. They get a report each month. Like, that is huge. And you should, like, talk to your cell phone provider about something like that. Because what's the worst thing that happens is maybe your kid sees something on accident, which definitely happens. Or they seek something out on accident, and you're able to have a conversation of, like, hey, why was this a thing? Right. And you're able to be with them on it. Whereas opposed, you're not able to see it at all, and you have no idea.
Yeah. And it could really develop some long and deep issues in somebody. But before we wrap up, and I've just got another meeting to get to, but I would just say, as a final encouragement, nobody's alone out there in facing this question. There's other parents walking through the exact same issues. There's organizations committed to helping and supporting parents. Again, I strongly recommend checking out Not My Kid, or not to self-promote. I really don't. It doesn't bother me whether you watch this or not. But I had a conversation on our church's page. Maybe you can throw the link in with with a rep from that organization that just, it was a helpful enough conversation hearing about the ways that they support families. There's also churches ready to provide support and encouragement to you in a community sense. And I would say lean into those communities, parents, organizations, churches, family members. Really remember and remind yourself, you're not alone. And God's put us in this world with connections to other people, and social media is a augmented sense of that. And so a great way to keep that balance is to lean into the relationships He's given us in person as well.
Yeah, amen. And I the only encouragements that I would have is, talk with your kids.
Yeah.
That's the entire purpose of this podcast, is to get you talking with other people, and eventually to get you talking with your kids and see what they're into. Maybe you don't know anything about your child's social media habits. Ask. Start building this relationship so that it's open and it's an open communication. The last encouragement that I would have is keep an open mind when talking with your kids. There might be some things that you don't understand or might seem really alarming to you right away. But just try and be open, listen to your kids, take a non-judgmental stance, and then, evaluate, course correct, as needed with speaking the truth in love.
Enter into all those conversations, enter into all those tricky discussions prayerfully, and know that, and you've got a lot of support, and God promises to be with you in each of those interactions, each of those conversations, and certainly pulling and holding families together in the midst of a world trying to divide us. So thanks so much for inviting me on, and look forward to, further conversations down the road, but appreciate it, and always good to chat.
Yeah, thank you very much, John. Thank you all for watching or listening. You can check out the discussion questions on the link in the description if you're on YouTube or on our website. Make sure that you come back for our next Let's Talk About That episode, where I'm going to be joined by my wife, Hannah, and we're going to talk about spiritual kind of discretion or social media discretion, and knowing what is real, what is not, what to post, what not to post. So thank you again so much, John, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
See ya.